Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching by Rabbi Rebecca Schatz.
So before I pass out the source sheets, I want to do a little bit of a conversation first about two concepts here. So today is Shabbat Chazon. This is the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, which starts Monday night this year, goes until Tuesday night. And the Shabbat following Shabbat Chazon and following Tisha B'Av is called what? Shabbat Nachamu. So Chazon means vision, and Nachamu means comfort. So we have this Shabbat of vision leading us into Tisha B'Av, this holiday that commemorates the destruction of the temples. And the Shabbat following is a Shabbat of reminding us that we should be comforted after spending 25 hours discussing the destruction of something that was so dear to us as a people. Growing up at camp, and I'm curious if anybody else had this experience, whether at camp or elsewhere in your life, growing up at camp, Tisha B'Av was always something that we celebrated as destruction for the kind of first part of the day, right? So in this year, it would have been Monday night through Tuesday, kind of afternoon-ish, like right around where lunch would be if it wasn't a fast day. And then from lunchtime, let's call it noon, until the end of the day was this experience of rebuilding, right? Because we are in a mindset of understanding that there is destruction, but also very aware of the fact that if we took a poll right now in this room of who would like to see a third temple, my guess is that it would be fewer people than are okay with the way that we do services now without me sacrificing a goat on an altar, right? So there is an awareness to our modern day minds that destruction is something important for us to consider and to think about, especially of our history, but that it's also important for us to understand what comes after that destruction. How do we rebuild? How do we find comfort in the world that we are living in post-destruction? And I don't know if this is just me because I'm an optimist and not a pessimist. It's hard for me to focus in on destruction, especially of the temples, because and hopefully I don't get fired for this. The temple is not something that I'm excited about rebuilding, right? Don't tell. The idea what? It's on the record. Yeah, that's okay. I'm okay with it. I wouldn't have said it if I wasn't okay. The idea of having a central place far away from where you are right now, where we would have to go to experience spirituality, that doesn't work for me. I'd rather figure out a way that spirituality can follow me anywhere that I am and be anywhere that I choose to find community. Right? And you don't have to agree with me on that. That's okay. That's my opinion. Brent doesn't agree.
I didn't say I didn't agree. I just had a comment.
Oh, you have a comment. Oh, okay. So I think that's why we have this Shabbat of Chazon, this Shabbat of vision, of understanding what it is that we're supposed to look into, and then the Shabbat of being comforted by those feelings that we might have had looking into what that past really was. So I'm curious to hear from you before we hear from our rabbis. Why do you think this is? Why do you think that we have Shabbat Chazon this week and Shabbat Nachamu next week? What's the point? What's the point of having those two Shabbatot surrounding Tisha B'Av? By the way, we don't have this kind of straddling of Shabbatot for any other major holiday experiences. So curious to hear your thoughts around that, Brent.
I think it's because we have half a loaf.
He thinks it's because we have half a loaf.
In other words, you live in a modern time.
Yeah, you're here too. Yeah,
yeah. Of a Jewish people
yeah.
that can thrive with thousands of years,
yeah.
a couple thousand years without a country. That we have a lot of stuff that Tish B'Av in my mind only makes sense when you focus on the other things that happen on Tish B'Av.
Okay.
Not the destruction of the temple.
I see what you're saying.
And I think you have to face facts that we have that drill now. That's what I mean by we have half.
Got it. Understood.
And that there is some we have to take some account of the fact that we are not in that same state today.
Yeah, sure.
And that modifies a little bit of the pain of Tisha B'Av.
Okay, great. So maybe we are. I'm gonna put it in the context of the question that I asked. Maybe we have this vision because we actually need to recognize that which we are living with today, right? That which makes us comfortable in our spiritual spaces, that which allows us to understand community, that which makes us feel like a people, and understanding that there are things that happened in our past that might have gotten rid of that for those people back then, but that today we don't have to, that we're not dealing with the same kind of destructions, right? Today, we are not dealing with a temple being destroyed. Of course, there are other things that have befallen us as a people, but we aren't dealing with that in terms of the central location of spirituality being destroyed and not knowing how to find it. Yeah, Deb.
I think it might be a good sort of larger life lesson.
Yeah, great.
Like, this is what life is all about.
Yes.
Although we don't always have the luxury of knowing on a chazon moment what we never have, actually.
Sure.
What's coming,
Yeah.
right? It's not,
Yeah.
it's interesting, it's formalized, it's ritualized now.
Yeah.
To say, this is coming,
Yeah.
it's going to be really bad.
Right.
Sometimes in life you don't get that, but
Great.
maybe it's a way to look at your life and say, okay, this is really bad right now,
Yeah.
but something better is.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way of couching it, that we never have moments in our life that are difficult and that we know what is coming next, right? This is the way for the rabbis to say to us, okay, we know that Tisha B'Av is coming. That is difficult or is supposed to be difficult for our people. We're going to give you this Shabbat beforehand to prepare yourself for the difficulty. And then we're going to already tell you that there's a Shabbat coming afterwards where you're going to feel comforted literally by your people. Those are the words. Nachamu, nachamu, ami. They're going to feel comforted by your people for that pain that you can prepare for, but that you are undoubtedly going to feel in the middle. That's really, really beautiful. And there is no other place in our lives where when we are going through something difficult, we know, we can hope that there's going to be something beautiful that comes from it, or that there's a comforting moment that happens later, but we don't actually know what it is or when it's coming. Yeah, Liana.
Just building off of what Beth said, I think like that reminds me of how people respond to PTSD.
Yeah.
Go back to the actual experience
Right.
that you experienced and move through it again in a sense of safety.
Yeah,
In a place
yeah.
of safety. And how beautiful that is as an opportunity for us. Like the first time, I grew up without keeping Tisha B'Av,
Yeah.
knowing what it was.
Yeah.
And when I first heard about it, it was about like, what an opportunity to practice grief.
Yeah.
Have to actually feel it in that same way.
Yeah, you're gonna like what this Akedat Yitzchak commentary says, because that's exactly right. That there is this moment of, or not even moment, there's this whole day for us to practice that grief, to be able to put ourselves back in a situation that we did not live through, and that even the people, once Tisha B'Av was a holiday, didn't live through, right? That we were already experiencing something that a generation before us had experienced, and needing to put ourselves back in what that pain, what that destruction, what that fear must have felt like. You said PTSD, which is really interesting, because I think when we think about, and we'll see this in a moment, when we use this idea of putting ourselves back into a situation, we aren't always aware of what the reaction is going to be, right? Someone who is dealing with PTSD might be put back in that situation and be and have healing effects from it. Others might be put back in that situation and completely break all over again, right? And the rabbis are actually, not that they don't care, but they're not as worried about that for us. They just want us to have the experience of being put back into it. Yeah, beautiful. I also didn't grow up with Tisha B'Av. I didn't know what Tisha B'Av was until I went to camp and was a counselor for second session. Because first session, you Tisha B'Av doesn't happen. It's not a holiday that happens at school. So I didn't even know that Tisha B'Av was a thing. And then all of a sudden I was telling my campers to sit on the ground, and I was like, what are we doing? What is this thing? I've never heard of this before. Yeah, Nico.
Sort of just build off of what was just said, is that like it's it's smart ritual design, I think, to have basically like an on-ramp and an off-ramp to essentially exactly what you said, sort of experiencing traumatic events or remembering them in a controlled environment.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, it's especially, I mean, it's always valuable, but I think it's going to be especially valuable this year to think about, like we're supposed to be sort of like getting into this mood, but it's not so much a mood because of the grief that we're experiencing because of the war and October 7th is very, like, frontal, that it might be really worth our while, I think, like, on Shabbat Nachmu to, like, give ourselves that space to come down from it. And I think the rabbis were like, you know, it could be dangerous. We could get sad and sort of like lost in the sauce or whatever, and we need to do something to bring them in and then to bring them back.
Yeah. And there is something. I mean, we're about to enter. By the way, there are not enough for everybody in this room for sure. So if you can share with the person next to you, that would be wonderful, especially if you came with them. And if not, that's okay. But it would be great to share. To build off of what Nico just said, we're about to be in a season of experiences that do exactly that, right? Like we have Elul, and then we have Slichot, and then we have Tishrei, and Tishrei even goes from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur to Sukkot to Simchat Torah, right? So we have these holidays, these experiences, these rituals that build upon feeling and upon holidays that allow us to feel a certain ebb and flow in how we also react to and experience the community and holiday. Do you have something to say? Deb, and then Bobby, and then Gabriella, and then we're going to look at a text. Yeah.
I was just wondering, I think this would be a conversation for different, but whether Rosh Hashanah is analogous to Shabbat Chazon and Yom Kippur.
Oh, interesting.
Like Tisha B'Av, and then the joy
Beautiful.
of Sukkot is brackets the big fasting.
Yeah, I love that. That maybe if we were to put these onto the holidays that we're about to experience, is Shabbat Chazon, Rosh Hashanah, and then do we get this kind of like 10-day period into Yom Kippur that then can lead us into another 25-hour fast, first of all, and then that can also then lead us into Nachamu, which could be like Ne'ilah, Simchat Torah, Sukkot. Very interesting. I love that. Okay, Bobby, Gabriella.
I feel like it's a way zooming out and then back in
Okay.
terms of time and space. So
Yes, sure, totally.
with Chazon, you're zooming out and you're saying, like, why are we here?
Yeah,
What
beautiful.
happened in the chain of our tradition?
Yeah.
We are mourning, and why is that relevant now?
Yeah.
And then in terms of zooming in, it's like finding comfort in the here and now with
Yeah.
who we're with and like what matters now, what's relevant.
Sure.
But I want to just add something to what you're saying, which is not that I disagree with you, but maybe it's a yes.
You can disagree.
It's a yes and when it comes to the temple, right?
Yeah.
In terms of Jewish pluralism and peoplehood, for some people, obviously that matters.
Sure.
But also, this matters, right? So
100%.
it's like- So, and how we, like, with October 7th and everything, like, how do we come together as a community and
Yeah.
find ways to coexist in a yes and type of capacity, which obviously takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge for, like, this generation.
Yeah, totally. And I think that echoes a lot of what Nico said, which is this like ability for us to zoom out, see what that whole picture was, and then remind ourselves to come back to the present and recognize, okay, yes, that happened. That was big. That was important. We need to focus on what was, but we also need to focus on what is. And if we wanted to bring in what's gone on in our world this year, right, that's going to happen a lot in these high holidays because we're going to be whooshed back into what happened on an anniversary, right, which comes right in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur this year, but also we'll feel it, I'm sure, on Simchat Torah, right, that gets whooshed back to a thing that happened, but the world has changed a lot since then, right, and some things have stayed unfortunately very much the same, but other things have changed a lot, and we also need to focus in on how has our world changed for the better and for the worse, based off of those events, and that can be the Nachamu, right? I'm not sure that we'll be so comforted by looking in on those things, but understanding that there are ways in which we can put ourselves into the present to recognize what is happening in this moment rather than just commemorating or zooming out, as you said, to the things that have happened in our past. Yeah, Gabriella, and then we're going to go to this.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you know, and I would be interested in hearing other things that happened on Tisha B'Av, because I know that there were other pogroms and other events that happened. And today, I'm not very comforted in what is happening.
Sure.
And I'm sure that's common to people because I see a very existential threat to Israel. And so we need to try. I mean, the fact that things are going to get better is not just going to happen from the sky.
Yeah.
You know?
Right, for sure.
We have to see to it that we are strongly united with our fellow Jews, and there are Christians who are united with us, more conservative Christians who I consider friends.
Yeah, so I think one,
to make things positive in terms of Israel's betterment.
Right.
And, you know, we have to have an administration that is favorable to Israel.
Okay, we're gonna get into this. Okay, so it's okay, I got it. So the way in which people talk about Tisha B'Av in terms of like thinking that other things might have happened on the day, there's not actually like accurate depiction of, you know, this happened on this day. There's lots of midrash and lots of decisions around, we're going to use Tisha B'Av because it's a sad day to kind of be a catch-all of all these things that did happen to our people. But it's actually, I remember when I was growing up, one of the things that was talked about quite a bit. I was getting what's called a master's concentration, which is kind of like what a minor is to a major. It's kind of like what a minor is to a master's, sort of, in Israel education. And one of the things we were talking about is how Tisha B'Av often becomes kind of like a second Yom HaShoah, and really it's actually not beneficial to either holiday for that to happen. We have Yom HaShoah, right? And Yom HaShoah is an important day, but if we have another day on the calendar that also catches on Yom HaShoah, it probably isn't going to allow for Yom HaShoah to be as important as Yom HaShoah is, right? So to get back to this point, there are things that people have decided that they want to kind of clump together on Tisha B'Av, but Tisha B'Av really is a holiday for us to discuss and to commemorate the destruction of the temples. So that seems to be what we do, at least in this community. That seems to be what we do. Okay, let's look at this. Let's look at this source sheet for a second. So I want us to, we're going to go through most of this pretty quickly. There are less pieces on here than I normally would bring. And part of that is because I wanted to hear more from you about what this feeling of chazon to nachamu is than anything else. Okay. Shabbat chazon. This is the Shabbat vision, which we've now talked about quite a bit. We read the Torah of a promised land that Moshe will never see, right? Moshe is told there's this place that everybody's going to go. It's going to be really great. Sorry, you don't get to. And that we will struggle to keep, right? That this will be a land that people are going to go into, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a land that's going to be easy for us to stay in. And we read about this vision of potential and hope, but from our rear view mirrors. And I love that that's how this is categorized, right? That we aren't reading about it. We aren't understanding it from the moment that it's happening. We are able to, from this place of Nachamu, to see into a moment where we needed vision. We needed to be able to see into what was going to happen. And Moshe especially needed to be able to see what was going to happen to his people, even though he wasn't going to go into the land. Okay, go to the second verse here, the Devarim verse, that starts with the word Eicha. What also starts with Eicha? Eich, wow. Yes. The Book of Lamentations in English. The Book of Lamentations, which we read on Tisha B'Av, it's called Eicha, and it's called that because the first word is Eicha. We see it in this week's Parsha also, right? And so this word Eicha often translates as how, but what we see here is that perhaps Eicha more existentially can turn into the word Ayeka. Where are you? Right? It's spelled exactly the same way. This idea of Eicha, of how could this be happening to our people? Actually, instead of that, why don't we think about, where were you when this happened to our people? Maybe that's a you in terms of God. Maybe that's a you in terms of other people, right? This is a way in which we need to recognize that maybe it's about all the questions of how or why or when, but maybe it's also about the responsibility of where were those who should have helped make this better or different, right? And that's a way to read this, because the verse says, how can I bear unaided the trouble of you? This is Moshe speaking. How can I do this if you all are going to be so difficult to deal with, is basically what he's saying. And so what this commentator is saying is, okay, well, why don't we say, Ayeka? Why don't we say, where's your responsibility in me dealing with you as a people? right? Me as a leader, I need you also all to behave better. Because if you don't behave nicely, it's hard for me to be your leader and to lead you into the ways that I think are necessary. Okay. Yeshayahu. Okay, Yeshayahu is the Haftarah that Yaakov read for us just a few moments ago. And it starts with this word, Chazon. Chazon Yeshayahu. He had a vision. And the reason we read this Haftarah is not just because it's about to be Tisha B'Av, but also because it's exactly what's happening to Moshe. Isaiah is having a vision into what's coming for his people, really not even for him next. So too Isaiah, and this is the beginning of Isaiah, the beginning of the book of Isaiah 1:1, right? The first word is chazon. There's going to be some kind of vision, right? And prophets are known for having vision, so this isn't so surprising. However, this idea of Isaiah having this vision going into his next experience, just like Moshe, right? So he's using this vision as a way of understanding, okay, there were all these people and now what's going to happen to them. So it's the beginning of his journey, whereas for Moshe, it's the end of his. But as we've now talked about, for Moshe, it's a vision, but of the past. For Isaiah, it's a vision moving forward. Those are two, they sound similar, but they're two very different things, right? They're based off of perspective or point of view. Eicha, the book of Lamentations, also starts with the word Eicha, as we've now discussed, but it says, Hashivenu, this is not the beginning, this is the end. This is the penultimate line, but we read it at the end. We don't like to say bad things at the end of Aliyot or at the end of verses, of chapters. So we actually repeat this line again because the last line of Lamentations is really bad. So we go back and we're like, no, it's okay. Don't worry. There's going to be a really nice line at the end. So this is the last line, and we read it twice. And it says, Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem. If I had to choose a line in our canon that was my favorite, I actually think that this is it. There is so much you could unpack in this line because it's constant. It's a, what are those things called? The kids sit on a teeter-totter? A seesaw. Yeah, sure. But where you like go, is that a seesaw where you go back and forth? Okay, yeah. It's constantly seesawing in between. Hashivenu means to return. Adonai elecha, to you, so return us to you. Venashuva, and I will come back, or I will return. Chadesh, new, for the days that came before me, right? There's like this before and new and before and new and old and new and old and new happening in 8 words or whatever this is, 7 words, right? And it's amazing that we were thinking about what it means to think of a past and go towards a future all in one sentence. And at the end of Eicha, right? Okay, destruction of our temple. That was really bad. We've now spent 5 chapters talking about how bad it was. Now we need to move forward. We're going to think about how our days of new can be like the days of old and therefore better. Okay, turn the page. I'm doing this all very quickly because we're running out of time. Akedat Yitzchak. I want to read this because Liana brought something up that I think is going to be relevant to this. So the Akedat Yitzchak, this was a 4-page commentary that I broke down into like 5 sentences. So if you want to read the whole thing, more power to you, and I can send it to you, but I just know that this is only a very small chunk of a very, very long commentary. This is on the Parsha. This is not on Hashivenu, which we just read. The only way to progress towards moral perfection is to refine and constantly purify one's personality. I don't love the word purify, but I didn't want to change his words. The idea is to better yourselves, right? To do teshuvah, to Hashivenu yourself, right? To return to yourself, to a better version of yourself. First, things that are not so great in one's personality have to be eliminated, right? This is actually just telling us how we need to approach tshuva and how we need to approach rebuilding ourselves into the people we want to be. First, you have to figure out what are those things that I don't want, right? You have to get rid of what he's calling impurities. Again, I don't love that word. Then the remaining acceptable raw material has to be brought to a state of high polish. Okay, you realize the things that you don't want to do anymore. You no longer want to eat chocolate. So you try to figure out the ways that you can eat more vegetables, right? That's obviously a very basic example. But if there are things about you that you want to change, You have to figure out how to eliminate those things or work on those things, and then recognize the things that are really wonderful about who you are and lift those things up. So in Liana's example of talking about PTSD, this is actually very important, right? Go back to the source of the thing that is hard for you, that potentially the Akedat Yitzchak would have called an impurity. Again, I think it's a terrible way of just saying something that's a challenge and hard for someone. But put yourself back into that, change that, be able to work on that, and then recognize the things about your personality that could help you become that person that you are hoping to be. Just as a mirror, which has been slivered, I think is what it's supposed to say, silvered with faulty material. Oh, I see. Silvered with faulty material, meaning painted with faulty material, and the backing of which has not been polished properly, cannot reproduce a true image. Right? So something that's made out of material that's not going to allow you to actually see that which is supposed to be seen, right, beautiful in front of you, is going to be difficult to use in that way. So a person cannot reflect Torah and truth in a proper manner unless they have perfected themselves in the aforementioned fashion. Our soul is like a mirror which reflects the images it has absorbed. This seems to be a very, very important thing for us to especially think about for Tisha B'Av. Right? If we just focus in on destruction of our people, we're going to always think that we're the victim, right? And we're going to always think that there is going to be trouble that's coming to us, right? Which is not actually always the case. And so we need to recognize the ways in which if we settle ourselves to believe that we are a reflection of everything that's happened to us, and that we can't change any of that, right? We can't come out of that PTSD. We can't come out of those experiences that have created a community for us. Then we're going to be stuck. We're going to be stuck in that destruction mindset, right? Or that victimhood mindset. Maimonides points this out in chapter 7, of his introduction to the Tractate of Avot. Prophetic visions departed from the prophets when they were angry, when they suffered personality lapses. Okay. So what I want us, right before I finish in 30 seconds, what I want us to see is that Shabbat Nachamu has the verses Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, Yomar Elokecha, meaning that there was comfort that was brought to the people that God said was going to be brought to them. So the fact that we can know, as Deb mentioned earlier, the fact that we can know from the start of this moment of fear and tragedy and destruction and putting ourselves back into a space of hurt, that Nachamu is coming, allows us, I think, and maybe this gets back to what Liana was pointing out, I think that actually allows us to fall deeper into what that fear and that destruction feels like, because we actually know that we're going to be pulled out. Rather than in moments in life where we don't always know that there is going to be something wonderful that comes at the other side. And so it's harder to stay deep in that thing that's hurtful, that's hurting us. I want to read this last Rabbi Shefa Gold thing, and then if there are like 2 comments, I'm happy to take them, but then we're going to do Musaf. I was about to say Mincha, but we're going to do Musaf. We'll do Musaf first, I think. Rabbi Shefa Gold has asked the question, what does Shabbat Nachamu have to do with feeling comfortable? Right? Because as we all know, Shiva is this way actually, right? As we all know, just because you're sitting Shiva doesn't mean that you all of a sudden find comfort, right? You're still grieving. We just try to create a comfortable environment, right? So, okay, great, fabulous. After Tisha B'Av, there's going to be Shabbat Nachamu. Well, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you forget that there was all this destruction and all this pain just because we're saying you're going to be comforted. There has to be something that comes out of it. So she says, the deep place of comfort that God offers, and we seek comfort so deep that we can live with the discomfort. Not live with other people's pain as if it needed no healing, but live with the discomfort we bring into our own lives if we seek to make healing happen. We have to be uncomfortable with the things that have happened to us to be able to see a world in which we can heal for others. Right? There's a lot of that going on in this world. You could use any example you'd like, and that is happening everywhere, right? That is something that we are very capable of understanding, that we might feel hurt or we might see pain, but unless we can take ourselves out of that discomfort long enough to feel a little bit comfortable with how we can help another person who's dealing with other pain feel healed, that's where this comfort lies. As Shabbat Nachamu approaches, may we be blessed with that kind of deep comfort and with the ability to take action that it engenders and bestows. Does anybody have any thoughts now that we've gone from Chazon to Nachamu? Any thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, a thought, but first just a disclaimer. There's somewhere we have to be, might have to
Okay, just you can just give your comment, and we'll probably be quicker. We'll get there quicker. Yeah.
Whatever. It's
Yeah.
So, one metaphor I love
Yeah.
is that grief is kind of like a stone in your pocket.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
always there, but some days it's a stone, some days it's a boulder, some days it's a pebble.
Sure.
And
Right, so you're always feeling that discomfort or that pain, or in this case with the destruction of the temple, we're always aware that that's something that happened. It's just a matter of how are we feeling it in our bodies, whether it's big or small. Right, great. Other thoughts, comments? Yeah. Did you have a thought? Sure. Your hand's like half up, so I wasn't sure. Yeah.
I really like this idea of like both. It is like both and thinking, sort of like as Bobby just brought into the room, in the sense that like yes, your pain exists, but also like we need to be able to step out of that a little bit in a way that is both comfortable but probably also functional in order to be able to help other people. Because at the end of the day, like it's not all about each of us, like each individual person. It's about us as a collective, and we're all sort of bound together in that way. And I think that can be a special challenge in the United States, where we have this sort of like rugged individualism.
Yeah, sure.
And what we actually have, like in Jewish community, is very unique within that sort of cultural landscape. So like, but that doesn't mean that we don't fall victim to sort of this self-centeredness. So I think it's a great reminder of like, yes, feel your feels, and also like, don't let that suck in everyone else's. Like, don't become a black hole.
Sure,
you know?
sure. Yeah. Other thoughts, comments? Yes, Paula.
I really wanted to sort of build on what Deb had said in the beginning about it's unpredictable. When we're in it, we have no idea.
Right.
There will be a light at the end of the tunnel. We
Sure.
have all these expressions about
Sure.
what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
And even individually, as Nico said, and collectively.
Yeah.
And so it's very reassuring on a both in a community base and in a personal interior base that there's so much suffering and we're doing it together, and there's all this possibility of light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And that your favorite line, I think, is mine. That comes to me.
Yeah.
Like those words are really very powerful. They're very the Nachum part of it.
Yes, very comforting. Right. So I hope that what we can take from this is that we are about to go into Tisha B'Av, and I'm not standing here to tell you how to think about Tisha B'Av or what you should focus on for Tisha B'Av. That should be your personal journey through the holiday, but to recognize that it's okay to kind of dwell and be amongst these thoughts of this is a lot, and this has been a lot for our people, and there are moments that feel heavy and sad and scary, and yet we have the beauty of knowing that we are in this room together, and we will be together next week, God willing, that there is that nachamu that comes, right? That there is that comfort that comes after this for us to recognize that as a people, really as a community, not even bigger as a people, but just as a community, we are able to come together for these moments and dwell in what is tough so that we can also be together in the moments of comfort and celebrate those as well.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.